Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and episode 6 of restoring the UK's cheapest MX5 Mark III. Today we're going to look under the bonnet, we're going to address some mechanical issues that are impacting the performance and the VVT in this car. If you're not already, please think about giving a like and subscribe. Stay tuned. So ever since I got this car, it's been struggling to get up to temperature. When you're sat in traffic, it gets nice and warm, but the minute you start moving, 30 mile an hour or above, the temperature plummets again, which to me is saying it's got a stuck open thermostat. So what I'm going to do in this episode, we're going to drain down the coolant, we're going to whip off the thermostat. Whilst we're there, we're going to replace the coolant temperature sensor. I don't know if that's faulty, but for a £10 part, while the coolant's out, it makes sense to do. So let's get the car up in the air on some ramps, drain the coolant and start getting at that thermostat. So in the Mark III, the thermostat is below the throttle body. So this is the throttle body. So we're going to take that off. In order to do that, we're going to need to take the airbox off, to take the throttle body off, to then gain access to the thermostat. But before we do that, we need to drain the coolant out of the system. So first things first, I'm going to pop off the coolant cap to release any vacuum in the system, help it drain down. Then we're going to dive under the car, and Mazda have very kindly put a cutout in the under tray with a crosshead screw to drain the radiator. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a clean bucket, we're going to pop it under there, and we're going to drain the coolant out. Let's see how much of a mess we can make doing this. So next we want to remove this vacuum hose just by pulling these blue clips, squeezing them, and this should, in theory, there we go, come clean off. Twist that out the way where it's not going to get damaged. Now we want to remove all these plugs, these hoses here, and just make sure we've got as much access as we possibly can to getting this off without damaging anything. With the throttle body now exposed with all the air hosing off, we can get access to these 4 8mm bolts. So let's whip those out and then we should be able to see the thermostat. So that's the throttle body off. This has developed a little bit of an idle issue, which I am told from reading online is to do with all of this gunk. Sorry, all of this gunk in here. It's filthy. From what I can find out from my research, there is no idle control valve. It's all done via the electronic actuation of this butterfly in the throttle. So what I've got is some carb cleaner. I'm going to give this a whiz around with some carb cleaner, give it a real good clean up and see if that goes some way as to helping the idle issue this car is experiencing. So the throttle body's off. With all that said and done, we can now see the thermostat, just about see some of those bolts there. So let's get these hoses off and let's get to those bolts there and whip the thermostat off. Again, as with so much on this project, it's lucky that I've got the replacement parts so I can see where the bolts are. So from looking at this, I do believe the thermostat is orientated something like that. So I know I've got 1, 2, 3 bolts I need to undo. Let's get it done. So the old thermostat's off. Here's the replacement part. They are identical, which is good because there are 2 different lengths of this you can buy. I don't know if this is stuck or not. It's a pretty tight spring, it's hard to actuate, but we're going to replace it. Make sure that it's bolted up tight, no leaking or anything. See if that fixes our temperature issue. One thing to be very careful of, you have your inlet manifold just here. Be very careful you're not getting any coolant in there. You don't want that in your engine and hydrolocking it, so make sure you don't get any coolant at all in that inlet manifold. Let's get this new one bolted up. We can get all the hoses back on and start putting coolant back in the system. New thermostat's bolted on. You can see exactly what I'm saying about not wanting to get water in the inlet manifold there. But for now, let's get our hoses clipped back on that connect to that thermostat, and then we can look at cleaning that throttle body and getting that back on. So that's looking a country mile better than it was before, and you can really see how that would cause idle issues. See the light through the top and bottom of that butterfly where it sits slightly open. That was totally blocked off with just rubbish. So that should allow the engine to breathe a lot better. Let's get that back on. So the throttle body's back on. Now we're going to do things like put these vacuum pipes and these breather pipes back on once we've got the elbow on, and then we can hook it back up to the airbox. I have got a new filter on the way, but in true channel fashion it just hasn't arrived in time. When that turns up, we'll put the new filter on. Let's do it. And there we have it, all back together up top. Now we need to get underneath, put the drain plug back in the radiator, start filling that coolant. Let's do it. So Mazda uses a particular type of coolant called FL22. You might have guessed it. It's in the post, it hasn't arrived yet, so it pains me to put this back in. It's quite filthy, but I'm hesitant to put just water in case it starts corroding in the block. So I'm going to put this in and I'm going to swap it out for some fresh coolant when that arrives in a day or two's time. So please don't hate me for this, I'm hating myself enough as it is, but I need to get the car run up to temperature, check for leaks and make sure that thermostat's working. So that's almost full in the tank. I'm going to start the car, get the water pump turning and make sure that that's pulling the coolant through, and I'll keep topping it up as that's pulling through. Whilst I'm doing that, I'll be checking things like the coolant hoses, making sure they're all getting hot, there's no airlocks anywhere. So what we should see As that thermostat opens, that will drag coolant into more parts of the tubing that's not already there. This should drop, we'll be able to put the last bit in. What we're waiting for is that level to drop when the thermostat opens, so that we can then add what's left in here back into the system.
One eternity later.
So that's the thermostat changed. We've been driving for about 20 minutes now, and the needle is planted steadily at the centre of the temperature gauge. When we're in traffic, it sits nicely, it doesn't climb, and whilst we're driving with air travelling through the radiator anywhere between 30 and 70 mile an hour, it's still planted in the middle of that temperature gauge. One huge benefit of having that temperature sitting at the right place, not only is the car working as it's intended, but the performance difference in this engine, now the variable valve timing is working properly, is huge. When you get to the top of the rev range, it's like a different car. Definitely a job worth doing, and I hope this video has been of benefit to some of you who might be trying to give it a go. And there we have it, guys, changing the thermostat and the coolant flush on the cheapest Mazda MX5 Mark III in the UK. In the end, I didn't actually change the temperature sensor. It's right down there at the back of the engine, and when I got there it looked pretty new. Having put all the coolant back in the car, it's running up to temperature and reading everything exactly as it should. So I'm not concerned about that. I have a spare if I need it, and I know where it is. Changing the thermostat was probably about a 35 to 40 minute job. Dead easy. What I haven't put on camera, which I should have done, and I'm sorry, was the 2 hours I spent chasing an airlock around the car. Not my finest moment, it was a complete pain. I was popping off hoses everywhere. I had all of the heater matrix hoses off, I was funneling water down, I was compressing the coolant tank to try and force the coolant through. I had the radiator hose back off the thermostat, and in the end it turned out that all you need to do is hold the car at 2,500 RPM, get the water pump spinning and flush the coolant through. So absolutely not my finest moment there, but hopefully that will pay dividends for some of you when you're doing this. You won't fall foul of the same things I did. So that's it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you're not already, please think about subscribing to the channel. I really do appreciate the support we get. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.